This meeting is called to order. It's 5 o'clock, and we're going to begin with a moment of silence and the pledge led by Christy Christie.
Face the flag. Pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome. It's good to see everyone here tonight. Are there any elected officials in the audience that I have not seen? All right, seeing none. Just a quick reminder for our school board and for the public out there, we are holding our quarterly workshop. It's going to be Wednesday, July 31st at 5 o'clock, and just prior to the workshop, we're having a special session for action on our superintendent's evaluation and contract. So board members, please be sure that you have that down on your calendar. For those who have missed last week's meeting, I want to welcome and introduce again Noah Kelly. He is our 2019-20 school board student representative from Carnes High School. We're very excited to have you here, Noah, and look forward to working with you. All right, board members, are there any changes recommended to the agenda? If I may, before I recognize you, Ms. Satterfield, one of the things that was initially on the consent agenda, the memorandum of agreement with the KCSO, KPD, listed as 6C1 on consent agenda. We've had some lengthy discussion in our workshop and also some public comments and emails that have come. So if there's no objection, I'd like to remove that from the consent agenda and make it a regular agenda item. All right, and I'm seeing or hearing no objection. Also, you received an email today, an amended version of the forms agreeing on the school buses from 6C2 and 6C3. Those updated agreements have been attached to your electronic agenda for consideration. Now, Ms. Avetti, did you have something else for the agenda?
Yes, I would like to add the resolution that is in front of the board on the agenda, and also note that the changes were added to the resolution.
All right, so that would actually be item 10E. Is that correct, Ms. Coatney?
Yes,
ma'am. All right. Seeing no objection.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clarify for the board's edification that 6C2 and 3 were done at my office's request. What we've done on I'm trying to figure out which one, 6. Okay, so 6C3 actually had a couple sections changed due to insurance purposes. This was after discussions with bus contractors. And just to call your attention to that, that was at section 3.21 and section 6.1 in that agreement. Again, those were just made so that the agreement would actually work, frankly, with bus contractors. And then 6C2 was just cleaned up for grammatical purposes and typos and things like that. That was the only change to 6C2. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. All right. Seeing no other lights, do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Babb, second by Horn. A discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to something that is really fun tonight. I'm so excited. we've got retirees here, and I am really thrilled to join fellow board members and our Superintendent Thomas as we recognize some of the most very special people this evening. Knox County Schools is extremely blessed with an amazing employees who care about children and this community. But unfortunately, with over 8,000 of you all out there, it's inevitable that we lose some to retirement each year. Words genuinely cannot express just how this board values each and every one who has dedicated many, many years of their lives to making the school system the best that it can be. So we just wanted to make time tonight to recognize our 2018-19 retirees and to relay our sincerest appreciation and regard for each of them. Even though there were 311 of you that were invited tonight, we realize that it's summertime, many are on vacation and have schedule conflicts this evening, but I would like to invite our Executive Director of Human Resources, Mr. Scott Bolton, to come forward and say a few words as well. And following his remarks, we would ask that each of you join Superintendent Thomas and myself in the front as your name is called. We'll be giving you a certificate of appreciation and we'll be taking some photographs. Mr. Bolton?
Thank you, Madam Chair, the rest of the board. As Ms. Hill indicated, we're so grateful for the work that our retirees have done, and just want to echo her words of appreciation. I want to say on a personal note, many of you folks I've had the opportunity to meet, and I want to let you know that I enjoyed my time with you. I enjoyed hearing about the plans for the future, and thank you for gracing our presence in the benefits department as we go through this process. I really have to say HR, the greatest thing about HR is getting to know people when they're going through those transitions in life, and that's probably one of the things as I step up to HR that I'm going to miss the most is working with these great folks with retirement. So the retirees that we honor tonight have earned the chance to pursue other interests and to serve their community in other ways, but there is no doubt that the district will miss you. You should be proud of the work that you've done to educate and care for our students, and never forget that you've laid the foundation for great things that are in store at KCS going forward. Thank you for your dedication and commitment, and please know that we wish you all the best in your future endeavors. And so we're going to call your name. Ms. Coatney's going to call your name. If you don't mind to come up to the side, I will give you your certificate, and please take a moment for our photo op at the front of the stage.
Our first retiree tonight is Sandy Ammons. Miss Ammons? Jean Perpaul Anderson. Candace Bannister. Mike Blankenship. Dr. Beth Blevins. Teresa Clark. Jane Carroll Coggins. Kathy Howard Dotson. Kathy Dugan. Cindy Ellison. Sherry Brown Hensley. Edna Hines. Jane Manning. Scott Manning. Tammy Roberts. Carrie Starr Russ. Robert Savory. Rebecca Sharp. Debbie Shubiak. Jane Skinner. Dr. Connie Smith. Susan Snyder. Laura Spargo. Rhonda Sternfels. Lisa Sullivan. Jack Tate. Mark Vaughn. Mike Wyatt. Kathy Young. And then we have a couple that wasn't sure they were going to get to be here this evening, but Vivian Ferguson, are you here? Amy Watts Plumley. And Sandy Ammons, did you get here? Did I miss any of our retirees that are here this evening? Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Bolton.
Thank you. I was going to tell you all were free to leave, but it looks like I didn't have to say it. I do want to say, though, you hear some interesting things as the retirees are coming up, and one of them actually shook Mr. Thomas's hand and said, "You were the best teacher I ever had." I thought that was sweet. And another one came out and said, "This is like graduation again." So thank you. Thank you all. As some of our retirees are leaving, I just want to remind the audience here and also watching at home that as we go through these agenda items tonight, it may appear that many of them we're going through quite quickly. Just be reminded that we did have a workshop last Wednesday night, plus many of us have met one-on-one with individuals involved in these items, and so they have been thoroughly discussed. All right, Ms. Coatney, if you would begin the agenda reading.
And for those who may have joined us late, item number 1 on the consent agenda was removed to item 10D on regular agenda items. So item 6, consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Norman, second by Horn. Discussion. All in favor? Motion carries.
Item 7A, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy D-130, donations, gifts, and bequests as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Norman, second by Horn. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
7B, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy D-241, internal school funds as amended.
So moved.
Approved by Norman, second by Owen. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
7C, approve first reading to rescind Knox County Board of Education Policy F-170, board acceptance of new facilities.
So moved.
Motion by Norman, second by Owen. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
7D, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy C-180, advertising and solicitation in schools as amended.
So moved.
Motion by Norman, second by Owen. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
7E, approve first reading of new Knox County Board of Education Policy C-181, political solicitation.
Second.
Approved by Owen, second by Norman. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
7F, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy B-180, public forum as amended.
So moved.
So moved by Norman, second by,
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, we have two versions of this policy attached to your agenda, so the motion will need to include either version 1 or version 2.
thank you for bringing them to my attention. Board members, I believe that you did get a minor revision that was sent to you on Monday. This, I was the one that actually recommended this. This comes from a direct suggestion from one of our regular attenders out there, Mr. McCold, who wanted to see to it that we have more emphasis on the positive in this policy instead of the negative. So that was the reasoning for the late submission. Ms. Horn?
I have a substitute motion that we approve version 2 of policy B-180.
Thank you.
I second.
All right, so on the substitute motion to approve the second draft, any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 7G also has two attachments. Approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy J-240, use of personal communication devices in school as amended.
All right, Mr. Norman, I'll defer to you on this, seeing this is how you have one of the versions.
Okay. The only thing that I've got is I'm speaking against the use of cell phones, of course, in the school, and I've got a list of things, reasons. I do not have the versions that we're voting on, so somebody's going to have to clarify that. I mean, I hadn't read them. So the point is, what's the difference between the two versions?
Version 1, Mr. Norman, is adding a heading, violation of personal communication devices, so just breaking that paragraph out. And then there's also a correction to a word underage in the final paragraph. Version 2 of the policy that is attached is the version that you brought at the last meeting.
Version 2.
Changing the guidelines to only the middle school use
Right.
of cell phones.
So for clarification, excuse me, the original version was submitted as version 1. All right, Mr. Norman's recommendation is version 2.
Okay,
All right,
so
thank
I'd
you.
like to make a motion to approve version 2. And then I'd like to speak to it also before it's voted on.
All right, so we have on the floor a motion to approve version 2 of personal use policy. Do I hear a second? Second by Ms. Owen. All right, discussion, please. Mr. Norman.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to just, of course, teachers are the ones who have to deal with cell phones, and in the school setting, for many teachers, it's a pretty difficult task, onerous task. And so I've got a list of some things that I think we should consider as reasons why I would prefer, our cell phone use policy to basically be the one that we've adopted for the middle schools. But that's not, so I'm primarily opposed to cell phones being used between 8:30 and 3:30. They should be, my position is they should be put up, they should be turned off, they should be in a backpack or some secure place, and students should be allowed to use them before or after school. That's essentially it. Now, here's some of the reasons. Okay, as we know, cell phones interfere with teaching and learning. Subcategories: students do not listen, phones ring in class, teachers must police. Phones are used to cheat on tests. Bullying and on social media happens frequently. There was a statement in the policy committee meeting about phone use that phones can be used academically and have advantages there. One negative point on that side would be, what about the kids who don't have phones? What about the kids who don't have a data plan, have the money to support a data plan, to have Wi-Fi? It seems that this is one form of discrimination on low-income students. We've experienced flash mobs in school where students alert where fights are going to be in the building, and then the mob knows where to congregate, where to collect. This creates very, very difficult administrative situations. We know drug deals take place inside the building and are facilitated by cell phones. We need to show that students can learn and can communicate in ways without the use of their phones. Studies show that screen time on devices are harmful. We know that brain development is affected by excess use of phones and screen time. And I'll end with this. Today at work, I need some help from this intern that's in our office. Physical. I've got to pick something up and carry it somewhere. And we have some time to talk. And he just graduated from high school last year, and we were talking about football because we both, played high school football. He played high school football. They went to a camp, a 3-day camp for football. He said it was torturous because for 3 days, the players couldn't have their cell phones. They were taken away. And they were forced to talk to each other. And before it was all over, they were having fights because they were forced to talk to each other. It's just amazing. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons for not having cell phones. I think it's just kind of common sense almost. So, anyway, that's my position. Thanks to my wife for some of the collection of notes here.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to speak on this from a student perspective. And the way that I read the second revision of the draft of this, I see that it strikes the differentiation between grades 6 through 8 and grades 9 through 12. So it reads that students, middle school and high school, can't access from 8:30 to 3:30. But with that being said, for an example, I took AP European History as a distance learning class this past year, and I didn't have a teacher. I took it through a teacher at a different school, so most of my things had to come online. And my lunch period, fortunately for me, was right before my European History class. So a lot of the times during lunch, I would sit on Quizlet and study for this. And for those of you who know what AP courses are, there's always a college AP exam at the end of the year. And being able to access these resources during the school year helped me get a 5. And I don't know if that makes sense, but the tester scored 1 to 5. And because of that, I can get college credit. So I do understand the PCD use in classrooms is a distraction, but I feel like the lunch aspect and between classes and other opportunities like that shouldn't necessarily be infringed on, especially at the high school level when courses are more rigorous and there are more opportunities for students to thrive based on their technological use. And then lastly, I would like to say, if you do take away these PCDs in the classroom, there are several other ways that students can communicate. For example, Carnes has been raising money a lot for Chromebook carts. And through this, students can get on social networking on their computer and communicate. Also, a common thing is to get on Google Docs, which is a live work setting to where students can still communicate between classrooms. And to mention the crime aspect, I think regardless of if phones are in school, it's going to be planned before or after. I think that's more of a, not necessarily an implementation of revoking the PCDs, but instead kind of monitoring and maybe enforcing the rules within classrooms a little bit more. But I would say with the revision, taking it out of the lunch period as well as interclass changes would not be the best idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to clarify, since the public may not be looking at this, that this version of the policy does not remove cell phones from the schools. It just takes all of the 3 different versions of the policy and basically lumps them into one so that they may possess communication devices while on school property. And of course, that covers a wide range, laptops and iPads, et cetera. And I have a question for Mr. Dupler. The last sentence that's kept in the policy under 6 through 8 says that a principal or principal's designee may grant student permission. Can we assume that a principal or principal's designee could grant a blanket permission for their school? For instance, if they wanted to grant permission for students to use them during lunch, could they grant that blanket permission under this policy?
Thank you, Ms. Owen, Madam Chair, but I do agree, Ms. Owen, with your interpretation that even under version 2, that's up for the motion, you are correct, because it does talk about specific academic purpose and it talks about other times. So it does mention class time, but also mentions other times. So, I mean, that does leave an area for discretion by the principal or assistant principal or even a teacher if the principal were to allow a teacher to make that decision. Okay. Thank you.
So essentially, it just compresses the policy and then leaves interpretation to the principal. Well, not interpretation, but decision-making to the principal. Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Satterfield?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The points that Board Member Norman brought up are very valid, and cell phones are an issue in our classrooms, in our schools. But I'm unsure if a blanket policy would be the solution to a societal problem, essentially. And I'm concerned that if we do a blanket policy, then we will see increase in, despite the academic benefits that Noah just shared, we might see an increase in disciplinary behavior because a student reacting when the policy says your phone has to be up. Granted, rules are rules and you have to follow it, but when you're dealing with certain, when you're dealing with high school students specifically, or, you know, students that feel like this is their possession, you can't take my phone, and then end up being suspended or in school suspension, whatever it may be, I think that that's going down a rabbit hole of just unnecessary suspensions and disciplinary actions for a blanket policy. And so it's a hard situation that we're facing because they are a distraction in the classroom. And our teachers are having to battle this, but I'm not sure if this is the solution. I don't have another solution, but I don't know if this is the solution.
Thank you. Ms. Horn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I kind of agree with Ms. Satterfield. I think that I agree with Mr. Norman that this is an issue, and I think you're right, it's a societal issue. And I'm not sure what the answer is. I think that I have heard from teachers who have problems with cheating, and this certainly makes that easier to do. And bullying is certainly an issue, and while bullying would still occur after hours on cell phones, the fact that kids have phones during the day allows it to continue during the day. And I think that certainly communication skills and personal relationships are suffering because of cell phones. So I'm glad we're talking about it. I think we need to be discussing this. I don't know what the answer is. I would love to see our policy be enforced as it is. I think we have a lot of times our policy, even before we make any changes, is not being enforced. And if those class times were protected and students understood that they are not to have their phones out, I think that we could make some progress toward addressing these issues of cheating and communication skills and all of that. So I'm not sure what the answer is either. I don't know that. I think my concern, Mr. Norman, with changing the policy to this is that we're already having a difficult time enforcing the policy as it's written, and that's my concern. So I don't disagree with you at all. I think that we definitely need to be discussing this, and we need to our principals need to be supporting our teachers in protecting those class time hours so that students are maximizing that time and not being distracted by all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Horn. Ms. Christie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I have concerns about enforcing it. I think that if someone has a cell phone on them, they're going to be tempted to look at it. And then you're going to have discipline, and how are we going to enforce it, and what's the punishment going to be if they pull these out at lunch and whatnot. But I also have a question. Was this policy, not the second one, but the first one, not discussed in the principal and teacher advisory committees?
Yes, ma'am. We did take this to the Principal Advisory Council, and again, a lot of varied opinions, but the policy, I think what we landed on was the policy that, as it was written, was what was preferred with the principals. And again, we discussed this in Teacher Advisory Council too, and again, a lot of the issues that Mr. Norman brought up were brought up by the teachers. It's a lot of varied opinions. I don't have a good answer either, and I know some of our teachers in their classrooms do allow students to use for instructional purposes. Other teachers don't, and the students come in the classroom and put the phone in a designated place, and they go on about the activity of teaching for that day, and then the students pick them up at the end of the day. So I think the way it's written allows for both of those. I'm sure there would be enforcement issues. I don't have a good answer, and I don't know if anybody does for it, but Principal Advisory Council sort of landed on where we are right now.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Ms. Bounds?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with what's been said. I think, Mr. Norman, you made some very valid points, and I really appreciate your courage in bringing this forward and having a discussion. I was going to ask the question, but you answered it, Superintendent Thomas, that the principals did support version 1, which I'm reluctant to vote against the administration, the administrators, if they support that. One of my concerns with version 2 is that it could create even more differences from school to school, and I think when you have differences from school to school, that angers parents that we're not being consistent across the system, and that concerns me. And I think maybe we need to, even after the vote, continue this discussion next year, and maybe there'll be more clarity by then and more studies done as to how it impacts learning.
Thank you. Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me say this up front. The policy, as with any policy, is only as strong as the people that are charged with enforcing it. And if they're going to enforce it, you know, it probably, yeah, there'll be some problems, but what you have to decide is, you know, does the good outweigh the bad? But the main thing is the consistency of people enforcing it. And I'll tell you a real quick story, and I realize things have changed since I was in the classroom. This happened probably about 15 years ago. But we had a policy at the time that students were not to have their cell phones out. They could have them in their backpack, they could have them in their jacket pocket, but they were not to be out where they could see them or where they could use them. Okay. First period ran from like 8:30 to 10 o'clock. About 9:15, and this was a large class. It was an upper level class, but it had about 34, 35 kids in it, which in and of itself makes it difficult for one teacher to watch everybody. This guy's cell phone went off, and I took it away from him. And he gave it up. He wasn't happy about it, but he didn't gripe too much. But at the time, I had a policy that if you wanted to go to the restroom, all you had to do was come up to my desk and sign the time out, and then come back in and sign the time back in. So he got one of his friends to slip him their cell phone. He went to the restroom about 10, 15 minutes later, called his dad, and at 10 minutes till 10, the office was calling saying that his dad was up there demanding that I bring the cell phone up there. So, I realize that was a long time ago and things have changed, but some things don't change. Just keep that in mind. If we're going to make a policy, we need to make sure that the administration and the teachers all follow it. Now, what you do you penalize them if they don't, if you find out about it? I don't know, but I agree with Ms. Bounds. There needs to be consistency from school to school. Thank you.
And thank you. Whose light was first over here? Ms. Owen?
And I'm going to ask Mr. Dupler to correct me if I'm wrong here, but looking at all of the changes all together, it looks to me like the policy for 9th through 12th grade just changes from silent to off. And regarding principal autonomy, the overall policy allows for principals to make the school rules more lax, but not more strict. And this version as a whole actually expands cell phone use in pre-K through 5.
And Mr. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Dupler, if you have a
Thanks,
comment.
Madam Chair. Ms. Owen, yes, I agree with your characterization. I mean, I think you're right that, the current policy in high school, prescribes some use that a principal could make a discretionary decision on with the revision. So that's correct, and you're right. It actually does expand the elementary version. So yes.
And Mr. Norman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to blame all this on the school board that brought this, allowed cell phones to be used to begin with. So, and I agree, you know, like no one makes a good point. There's special situations in the school. I think those could be accommodated, you know, by a principal. He looks at the situation, okay, you can use it during lunch or whatever. I think those kind of special things, you know, special students, special situation, that's a doable thing. But I do also agree that with Evity, that this is a disciplinary, this is a mess. It's a potential really difficult thing if you're trying to, when you try to invoke another rule like this. So I don't know what the answer is either. I hope that whatever the answer is, that we would have a whole lot less cell phone use in the school, period, in class, between classes, the whole thing. I don't know, you know, because I don't like kicking the can down the road and things like that and having another meeting about it. I don't think it'll change very much. I'm just gonna stick with my, you know, my desire to do it as version 2. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. I see no further lights. I'm going to ask for a roll call vote then. We are voting on whether to accept a version 2.
Well, do we have a motion to approve one or the other yet?
I believe we had a motion for 2.
Okay, to
Made a
approve
motion, and Ms. Owen
Version
seconded.
2.
just 2.
Just version 2.
Version 2. Are
Okay,
we-
and version 2 is
The Norman version.
This is my version.
Yes, yes. All right. Is everyone clear on that? We're voting on version 2, which is the one that Mr. Norman presented.
Ms. Satterfield?
I have a question. I have a clarifying question.
All right.
If we vote no as a board
Mm-hmm.
and consider version 1,
Yes.
thank you.
But we would need a motion on that, Ms. Owen.
All right. Go ahead.
Ms. Satterfield?
No.
Ms. Owen?
No.
Mr. Norman?
Yes.
Ms. Babb?
No.
Ms. Bounds?
No.
Mr. McMillan? Yes. Ms. Christie?
No.
Ms. Horn?
No.
Ms. Hill?
No.
That vote is 7 no votes and 2 yes votes, so the motion fails.
All right. We're now looking at version 1 that was presented. And remind me, did we have a motion on that?
We did not. Move to approve version 1.
Second.
All right. We have a motion by Horn, second by Babb. Is there any discussion? Ms. Horn?
Just to reiterate, I think the board is in agreement that we really want our principals and teachers to follow and enforce this policy. So that would be, correct me if anybody doesn't agree, but it seems like from our discussion that that's what we would like to see happen. So I do think that we should continue to have this conversation even if we're approving this, and that we should continue to look for ways to help our students. And so, anyway, just wanted to throw that out there because this is just going to continue to be an issue. So I think we need to continue to have the discussion and support our teachers in their efforts to make sure that they are not interfering with the instructional hours. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further lights, Ms. Coatney, if you'd do roll call again.
Ms. Satterfield?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Mr. Norman?
No.
Ms. Babb?
Yes.
Ms. Bounds? Yes. Mr. McMillan? No. Ms. Christie?
Yes.
Ms. Horn?
Yes.
Ms. Hill?
Yes.
That's 7 yes votes and 2 no votes. The motion passes.
All right. Thank you. Moving on to 8 grants.
Item 8A, approve Tennessee STEM Innovation Network grant for Farragut High School in the amount of $3,250 in recognition of the STEM school designation.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Horn, second by Norman. Discussion. All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
8B, approve Tennessee STEM Innovation Network grant for L&N STEM Academy in the amount of $3,250 in recognition of the STEM school designation.
So moved.
Motion by Satterfield, second by Horn. Discussion? By Norman. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
8C, approve grant from the Hartford in the amount of $10,000 designated to fire safety education efforts and programming for Knox County Schools kindergarten through third grade students.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Norman, second by Satterfield. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
8D, approve Project Diabetes Initiative Category B grant from the State of Tennessee Department of Health in the amount of $30,000 for Coordinated School Health's Choose Water Knox project for provision of water bottle refill stations at various schools.
So moved.
Second.
Approved by, motion by Norman, second by Horn. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
8E, approve memorandum of understanding with Great Schools Partnership for fiscal year 2020 for a grant in the amount of $220,000 designated for the Arts Integrated Elementary Tutoring Program at Beaumont, Belmorris, Christenberry, Dogwood, Green, Lonsdale, Maynard, New Hopewell, Norwood, Saramore Green, South Knox, Spring Hill, and Westview Elementary Schools.
So moved.
Motion to approve by Satterfield, second by Owen. Discussion? I would like to add before we vote that we need to never overlook the good work that GSP does for us, the kind of money that they bring to the table and the programming that they provide are absolutely essential and things that would be probably non-existent without their support. So thank you for that. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 8F, approve memorandum of understanding with Great Schools Partnership for fiscal year 2020 for a grant in the amount of $135,000 designated to tutoring centers at Bearden, Holston, Northwest, South Dole, and Whittle Springs Middle Schools and Central Gibbs, Carnes, and West High Schools.
So moved.
Motion by Norman, second by Owen. Discussion? Ms. Babb?
Yeah, I'm totally in favor of this. I just have a question because I know so much of what Great Schools Partnership does is with the, what am I trying to call it? The after-school programs, and this is getting into middle and high school, so I'm just more wondering how this is getting implemented.
Mr. Ricewick, would you like to address that, or please go ahead?
Happy to. Thank you, Madam Chair, Ms. Babb. Basically, these are tutoring centers for after school. Kind of the history of some of that was at the original inception, there were certain organizations that had reached out to Great Schools Partnership, and Jonathan Schoonover's here, if he can fill in more details if we need to, but and they had asked kind of particular sites of schools that they wanted to be part of. Basically what so that's how it began, and then they've continued funding for those as that funding from those companies has continued or not based on how they give to that. So schools are using this in different ways. A lot are using those for recovery credit types of situations for kids who need to make up credits, and they'll use the Edgenuity program that we use for that. Teachers also are paid to be tutors in there, so there's availability for tutors and hours for students who want the extra help for their courses that they have there. So that's what's been used at the high school, and we're seeing some expansion into the middle schools to be used kind of the same way.
Thank you.
All right. John, did you want to add anything to that? All right. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
8G, approve memorandum of understanding with Great Schools Partnership for fiscal year 2020 for a grant in the amount of $125,000 designated to teacherpreneur grant recipients to be announced in fall 2019.
So moved.
Motion by Norman, second by Owen. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
8H, approve memorandum of understanding with Great Schools Partnership for fiscal year 2020 for a grant in the amount of $30,000 designated for the Leaders for Readers program at Ballcamp, Beaumont, Belmorris, Bonnie Cake, Dogwood, East Knox, Fountain City, Green, Inskip, Carnes, Lonsdale, Maynard, Mount Olive, New Hopewell, Norwood, Pond Gap, Ritta, Sammy Hill, Saramore Green, South Knox, Spring Hill, Sunnyview, West Haven, West Hills, and Westview Elementary Schools.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Norman, second by Satterfield. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
9A, approve contract with Centus for cafeteria chemicals and towel service annually as needed up to $375,000 for the term of July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2020, which may be extended for 4 additional years, 1 year at a time, for a total of 5 years, using school nutrition funds.
So moved.
Motion by Norman,
Second.
second by Horn. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
9B, approve contract with Anlar LLC for external evaluator services up to $239,535.26 for the term of August 1, 2019 through July 31st, 2022, which may be extended for 2 additional years, 1 year at a time, for a total of 5 years, using funds from the Education Innovation and Research Grant from the U.S. Department of Education, approved by this Board of Education on November 14, 2018.
Motion.
moved.
Motion by Norman,
Second.
second by Horn. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
9C, approve proposal and use of state contract with NCS Pearson Incorporated for provision of a response to intervention universal screener for the 2019-2020 school year at an approximate cost of $227,335.50 using IDEA and general purpose funds.
So moved.
Motion by Norman,
Second.
second by Satterfield. Discussion. Ms. Owen?
Could we get some clarification on the amount that comes from general purpose funds?
Yes. Mr. Riswick? Or perhaps Mr. McPherson? I'm not sure who's appropriate for that.
I think, thank you, Madam Chair and Ms. Owen. I don't know that we have an exact amount with us, but I think Ms. Jackson has probably an approximation for that that might help a little bit, and we can get more details for you and get those to you.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson? I would have got to you.
That's fine. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. So for K-8, we serve every student with a universal screener, so that would come from general purpose funds. When we're looking at our high school students, if they are designated for Tier 2 or Tier 3 reading intervention in the general purpose program, that would come from our general purpose funds. If they are in a special education program, then it would come from IDEA. So just a small amount from IDEA. The majority of it comes from our general purpose.
Ms. Owen, did you have follow-up?
Yes, I do. I'm just thinking, Madam Chair, I think we need to point out that this $227,000 is an amount that is basically required by the state but not funded by the state. And so that's just something that we need to keep in mind. Thank you.
And thank you. Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any problem with it. I just want to make a comment. I believe I saw where Pearson announced late yesterday or early this morning that they would cease to print any textbooks from this point on. Did anybody else see anything to that effect, or did I misread what? I just thought that was, while we were dealing with that, that was an interesting thing.
All right.
If it is so, thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure that relates directly to
Well, not directly.
this, but
it is Pearson.
thank you, thank you. And did you have any comment, Ms.?
There is a textbook
Jackson.
side of the house with Pearson, and then there's an assessment side of the house with Pearson, and this would be coming from the assessment side.
All right, thank you, thank you. I had not seen that, Mr. McMillan, that they were totally, that's interesting. All right, Ms. Satterfield?
After a quick Google search, Mr. McMillan, you are correct. They're going straight digital and no more textbooks.
Thank you.
Thank you for that information. Any more discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 10A, approve fiscal year 2019 budget line item transfers in the amount of $179,887.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Norman, second by Horn. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
10B, approve technical writing as a special course for high school curriculum for the 2019 through 2020 through 2024, 2025 school years.
So moved.
Motion by Norman, second by Satterfield. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
10C, approve designation from fund balance in the amount of $4,200,000 to purchase textbooks for the 2019-2020 school year.
So moved.
Motion by Norman, second by Horn. Discussion. We would like to think that because of the announcement that Mr. McMillan just shared with us, that would save us some money, but it does not. So that's just for the record. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
10D, approve memorandum of agreement with Knox County Sheriff's Office and Knoxville Police Department with regard to school security officers and law enforcement officers.
So moved.
Motion by Norman, second by Christie. Is there any discussion? All right. Yes, I'd like to start with Mr. Thomas on this, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Just a few comments about this item. Just know there was lots of discussion last week, but our role is to provide the very best educational opportunities possible for all of our students. In order for us to be successful in this endeavor, we work very closely with law enforcement partners to provide a safe and secure learning and teaching environment for our students and our staff. The first memorandum of understanding was approved by the Board of Education in 2009, and the most recent memorandum of agreement was approved in 2010. Without an expiration date on the most recent agreement, which over the last 9 years, our partnership with law enforcement, which has worked very effectively, continues to follow the guidelines set forth in the 2010 MOA. The Department of Education recommends that we have an agreement. However, it is not mandated. So if the board wishes to defer action on the revised MOA, we will continue to work as we have over the last 9 years unless the board directs otherwise. The MOA that is on the agenda was a work in progress before I was appointed superintendent in 2017, and it remains our best effort to take what we have learned over the last 9 years and incorporate that into a new MOA. One very notable and significant difference between the 2010 MOA and the revised MOA is the shared goal between our school system and law enforcement. Although safety and security are paramount, this MOA has the mutual goal to reduce justice system involvement with all students. Decades ago, law enforcement presence was not necessary, as it is today. We know now that that presence is not only needed, but is wanted and welcomed. We appreciate the protection that our law enforcement partners provide for our students and staff. We will continue with our efforts to administer discipline in such a way as to keep students in school to the greatest extent possible. However, we do realize there will be situations where this may not always be feasible. It is my responsibility to provide a safe and secure learning environment for everyone on our school campuses, and my intent is to fulfill this responsibility. Knox County Law Department has informed me that the revised MOA complies with all current Tennessee laws, and I recommend approval of the MOA that's before you, and I appreciate your consideration for this recommendation. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. And before we get into board discussion, I've also asked Chief Paducas if he would come forward. One of the two things that kept coming out in our workshop, the issues that were addressed that I've asked for clarification, was number one, the training that our resource officers receive, SSOs receive prior to becoming employed in the schools, and also the issue about the use of handcuffs. So would you please address those, Chief?
Yes, ma'am. First, the issue of a law enforcement officer being placed in a school as an SRO and they have a 12-month grace period before they have to attend the 40-hour SRO school. What's important to remember about that is allowable under state law. And then the more important piece is any law enforcement officer, before they ever serve their first day as a sworn police officer, they receive hundreds and hundreds of hours of training. And then there are state laws that require that they receive at least 40 hours of training every year. And so when an officer is placed in a school, they literally could have thousands of hours of law enforcement training. And if you'll keep in mind that their primary purpose, their primary mission is to protect those kids, protect those teachers and staff members, and to secure that facility, they are more than qualified to do that because they've been prepared for that task since day one.
All right, and would you also address the specific training that your officers receive before they enter our schools?
Yes, ma'am. All of our officers, before they do their first day in a school, receive 9 weeks of training, plus another 32 to 36 hours of training that they typically receive right before they go into the school year that they train with our regular officers. And so our new hires get 9 weeks and then another 32 to 36. And then our existing officers every year get 32 to 36 in the fall when they report back, because they report back a week before school starts. And then every in-service day, we gather our personnel together and we have a very compressed, very focused training day. And so if we get 3 or 4 in-service days, that's another 24 to 36 hours of training in addition to the 9 weeks of training. So they are very well prepared when they enter a school for their first day.
All right, and then clarification on the issue of handcuffing and arrests, if you could give us those numbers.
Yes, ma'am. We discussed last week how many students are handcuffed by school security officers for the last couple of years, as well as how many arrests school security officers have made in the last couple of years. And last year, the 2018-2019 school year, 4 students were handcuffed by school security officers, and 1 student was arrested and handcuffed. And so of that 4, 3 were handcuffed, and then the 4th one was handcuffed and arrested. And then in 2017-2018 school year, 3 students were handcuffed, and we had 1 arrest. And the arrest in 2017-2018 were drug-related charges, and the arrest in 2018-2019 was a disorderly conduct.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Do any other members, don't go too far away, guys. Other members may have some questions. I would just like to state for the record also that these numbers, in my view, are incredible. They are incredible. The fact that we have 60,000 students in our schools that come to school roughly 180 days a year. I mean, we are talking about over 1 million days of students in schools, and of all that huge number, to have such a small amount that actually required that type of intervention, I think is pretty incredible and speaks extremely well to our community and the job that everyone does in our schools, not just officers, but teachers and administrators. Everyone does in our schools. So, Ms. Satterfield, I think I saw your light come on.
Oh, sure.
First.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm trying to think of my I'm trying to use my words. I guess I think the biggest issue, because I've been contacted multiple times from many people regarding this this agreement, and I'm not 100% sure of what delaying the vote would create, and so maybe some people can help me out on like what would that look like if we delay the vote. And then also I do want to, I'm glad this conversation has happened, and like the resolution that we'll vote on in the next item has happened, because it did bring out some information that I think at the end of the day, there's just been, the community doesn't really, and even myself doesn't really have a full understanding of enough information about how law enforcement works in our schools. And I think that is our job, to educate the community of how we integrate the law enforcement in our school. They're not going away. It's something that is mandated essentially, and we have them and we need them. And so having such few numbers, seven students, naturally I want none of them arrested, but I also don't want them to have the behaviors that they have either. But having 7 students in 2 years is really a reflection of the work that officers are doing in our schools. And so I just feel that we wouldn't be in this situation if there was a lot more information being shared from all parties that's involved with, from the Sheriff's Department, KPD, and our school resource officers. I think that's where the missing link is, that we're not sharing enough information. So again, I'm glad we were able to have this conversation, pull out these numbers to show the light of 7 students in 2 years when we have 60,000 kids is a really good number. And I would like to see more.
Thank you, Ms. Satterfield. Ms. Horn, I believe your light was next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to apologize to the people who've emailed me that I've not gotten back to. I have been having conversations with some folks and just wasn't at a point where I really could respond, so I will do that now. I appreciate, as I said last week, I appreciate the partnerships that we have with KPD and the Sheriff's Office, and the fact that we have 60 officers who are dedicated to our schools, I think is vital, because without those officers, we wouldn't have enough officers to cover all of our schools in various situations. So I'm thankful for them, and my understanding is that those officers, the reason for the additional time that those officers are able to have the training that's needed to be in a school, because it's mandated by law that can be up to a year, is so that personnel decisions can be, or personnel issues can be addressed and our schools can be covered. So I'm thankful that we have the ability to have trained officers in our schools, even if they haven't been through all of those protocols that pertain specifically to children. And so I'm grateful for those partnerships. I've spoken with several of the administrators in my area, and in speaking with parents in my schools over the years, I know that they're thankful when we have SSOs, RSROs in our schools. So they are very thankful for that, and they expect to see them there. I appreciate that this agreement includes several guidelines for principals, because principals are the ones who are directly dealing with the SROs and the SSOs, and so I appreciate the listing of responsibilities by the principals, and I feel like this will help guide them even more in their work and their partnership. From what I know, we've had great interactions between the entities, and I think that this will hopefully help increase and improve those relations. And so I thank you for the work that you've done on this, and for the support of these agencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Horn. Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Ms. Satterfield that clarification is necessary, and I think this MOA is an opportunity for that clarification, and I think it would be wise for us to embrace that opportunity to use this document and expand it so that it can be used to clarify and educate the public, so that they can see. If we have it in a document that people can read and it says exactly what those training opportunities are and those training requirements are, then we don't have to explain it one by one if they can find it there in the document. Last year, sometime between April and about this time of year, I was told that we had no officers from the Sheriff's Department that were specifically assigned to our schools. And so when I heard that we had 60 specifically assigned to our schools, that was somewhat surprising. So I think that alone is concerning to me, that we really need to look at exactly who is responsible for what aspect of enforcement there. A lot of times we hear about Columbine as the impetus for having additional security. We had a security person, it was a sheriff's department officer in my high school in the 80s. And I believe most high schools in my area did at that time. And nationwide, there is some misinformation regarding security officers in our schools because of Columbine. And I think it's very important to note that Columbine had an officer. We need to realize that. So when we are saying that we are adding officers because of Columbine, no, that's not the reason. Whatever the reason is, that's not what it is. That may be the reason people are using, but Columbine had an officer. Some of the folks who have contacted us have, I think they have assumed that we understood some of the things that they were implying. And I think it's important that people who come and talk to us on these issues need to not necessarily assume that we are going to be able to infer what they're saying. And one issue that I talked to last year, I talked to our sheriff about was what happens with information that may be shared. There's a lot of student information in our schools, and a lot of people have access to it. And the more people who have access to it, the easier it is to get out. I very specifically asked, and this was, I'll clarify what meeting it was. It was when the public was meeting with officials from ICE and from the Sheriff's Department regarding 287G. And my intent was to listen, but after I listened for a while and there were some questions not being answered, I asked some questions. And I specifically asked what would happen if someone in our schools illegally took information and shared it with the police department. And it took a while to get the answer and asking the question several different ways. But in the end, the answer was that they had no responsibility to ensure that that information was legally obtained and that they would act on whatever information. So if someone took them information about one of our students, they would act on that information, even if that information was obtained illegally, and that it would be the school's responsibility to deal with the illegal part. So we can look at this and say, well, FERPA protects. We can look at this and say, well, we don't share student information. Well, maybe we don't share information, but somebody could. And the more people we have who have access to that information, the easier it is for that information to get into hands who may feel that they need to act on it, regardless of how that information is obtained. Am I making sense? Because I may not be, so I would like to explain it further if that's not clear.
Chief, would you care to address perhaps the instruction your officers receive on sharing of any information, student information?
Yes, ma'am. And we receive, as I mentioned, refresher training a little while ago. Every year we get refresher training on FERPA, and there probably isn't a day go by once the kids get back in school that we don't have conversations about particular incidents and what we can share and what we cannot share. FERPA is our guiding document, and so in the MOU, when it talks about confidentiality of records, FERPA is the federal legislation that protects students and the reviewing of students' records. And Mr. Dupler, and you feel free to help me, Gary, but I have regular conversations with Gary and the law department about situations in which we can share information in situations in which we cannot. And we don't share information, nor are our law enforcement officers able to access it unless we help them do that. And we are not going to help them do that unless we are legally protected to do so. And I can tell you, sharing of protected information is taken very seriously. There's extensive board policy, there's extensive federal legislation, and then even our law enforcement agencies have extensive policy about compromising information and obtaining information illegally, and that would be frowned upon to a great degree at any of our law enforcement officers, not to mention our school security division. We have regular conversations about what to share and when to share it and how we can share it, and we do not do that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Owen, did you?
I want to be more specific, but I don't feel like I should, because, you know, there's that point where you just give people ideas. I don't want to tell them how to build things that they don't necessarily know how to build. Could I have some clarification on the 9 weeks of training? Is that 360 hours, or is it 40 hours spread over 9 weeks, or are those two different trainings that we're talking about?
The 9-week training is 9 consecutive weeks, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5-ish. And then the additional training, for instance, this year, we started a class at the end of May, and we will graduate that class on July 29th. They started on a Tuesday, they'll graduate on Monday night, the 29th. That is nine straight weeks. They typically don't train Saturdays and Sundays, but that is Monday through Friday for 9 straight weeks. And also on July 29th, our security force returns to work. They're typically off in the summer, except for some summer programs, et cetera. So they will return to work on Monday. And we will train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday with our security workforce that we've already hired and then that have been with us for anywhere from 1 year to much longer. And then our new hires, they will train Monday as part of their recruit school. And then on Tuesday, they will join their colleagues, their new colleagues, and they will join them for the rest of the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then they will report to their schools on Friday. And then at every in-service day, when the teachers are at training and the students don't attend school, our folks report to our training academy, and we train for the entirety of the day. And there also is some unscheduled training requirements that they have, and we have some other voluntary training, optional training that we provide in the evening. And so we knew the single best way to get better is twofold: good, competent, focused supervision and training. And we have both.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, I'd like to suggest if we could take this back for a month and include more of that information, I think it would be a much more useful document for the public, so they could see, so that we wouldn't have to explain that over and over. I think if we could have that available and have FERPA information available, and if we could, I would ask also that if Mr. Thomas could talk with Human Resources and possibly include something stating how we expect employees to handle, not just how to handle information, but consequences for failure to handle that student information appropriately, I think it would be a much more powerful document. Thank you.
All right, I believe at the moment we have a motion and a second on the floor to accept this document. So before we can address anything that you've suggested, we would need to have a vote on this. Yes, you can certainly make a substitute motion.
I'd like to make a substitute motion to put it off for 30 days.
All right, we have a substitute. Mr. Dupler?
If I may, thank you, Madam Chair and Ms. Owen. I did want to echo what Chief Bedusa said, is that FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and there's also corresponding state law, which is very similar, but adds a little bit to it. Basically, with law enforcement, unless it's a emergency or exigent circumstance, which would be something where there's imminent harm, such as a bomb threat, such as active shooter, something where somebody's about to be harmed. So in that instance, FERPA does allow sharing of quite a bit of information, but absent that type of situation, law enforcement, just like an average citizen, would have to get some kind of process, whether that's a search warrant, whether that's a subpoena, or something like that. So again, this MOU doesn't change any of that, never could change any of that. This MOU is simply a general guideline, and it doesn't trump any type of law, whether it's state law, federal law, or otherwise. One other thing I would point out is that, you know, our office has been working with Chief Paducas and these other two agencies, the Knoxville Police Department and the Sheriff's Office, and if you all defer this, that's absolutely your right to do so, but I would caution you that it would likely be longer than a month before this is brought back, because this is an agreement that's been going through the other agencies, and they would need time to review any changes. Thank you.
All right. We have a substitute motion on the floor by Ms. Owen, and the motion is to delay for 30 days. Is that correct in your motion? All right. Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Second by McMillan. Now, do we have any discussion on the substitute motion? Ms. Babb, did you want to address the substitute motion?
Well, I don't know where it goes on the first or the second or whatever, but one of the things that seems to be talked about a lot is FERPA, and I have to say there was a speaker last week that sort of struck me, and I looked into this, but the more I think about it, our law enforcement is trained on this. They are given training on what can be shared and what has not. But when we look at our school, we have students in there, we have volunteers in there, we have cafeteria staff in there. We have all of these people. At any time, any of them can share data also in a way that they should not be sharing, especially I think what's come up a lot is about illegal immigrants and that kind of thing. And I think we have focused so much on what is our law enforcement going to do wrong. There are people, I've been in the front office, and there's parents sitting around, and I've heard confidential information I should have no business hearing, and there's nothing keeping when you overhear it from that person going and sharing it. So I think we have got, with our law enforcement, they go through a lot of training on what not to do, whereas we've got a lot of our public that could hear some of this stuff and it has no training on that. So I just kind of wanted to put it in that perspective. And then secondly, I did hear from a lot of community people, and I tried to respond to a lot of them, and I might not have gotten to everybody, but it did make me start thinking about this more than I had before. And so what I did, and I really wanted to get the opinion of, was the principals, and I sent this to all of my principals and really asked them for their feedback, those in the 4th district, and had a lot of discussion with them, and every single one of them supports this in the way it is written. And a couple little just minor questions, and very quickly got answers. So anyway, I really liked hearing from my principals on what they thought about this.
Thank you. Ms. Bounds?
Thank you. Before we vote, I just wanted to publicly express my appreciation to all the people who emailed me with their concerns regarding the MOA. I do intend to affirmatively vote for this item recommended by Superintendent Thomas, and personally, I just do not see any positive reason to delay this vote at this time.
Thank you. Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It doesn't have anything to do with this particular resolution, and this may be just me, but I've said this, I believe, before. I resent having information thrown at us the last day in order to, and we're expected to look at it because a lot of us are busy and everything. And I mean, if you can't get it there before the last day, whatever it relates to, and like I say, it doesn't have anything to do with this, but you probably need to, you know, but we continue to we're doing better at it, but there's still things that pop up. Oh, we've got to have this approved. Well, whoever's in charge of it, whatever supervisor or whatever, it's their responsibility to get it there. It's the way I look at it. Maybe I'm alone, but that's all I want to say. Thank you.
And I appreciate what you're saying, Mr. McMillan, and just as a general comment, because this particular agreement involved so many entities outside of Knox County schools, I think that we didn't have total control over the time issue involved because of, other agencies. But I definitely hear what you're saying and support that.
Well, I didn't really mean it related to this. I thought I made that clear, but since you brought it up, it's so important, and apparently a lot of people don't understand it. If we had to put it off too much, or whatever, would it be, it wouldn't be the end of the world, would it? I mean, that's my opinion. Thank you.
Christie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I have a question. It was my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, our officers are not involved in student discipline processes, right? Or is that
Generally, that is correct. They are not involved in student discipline.
okay? And we have policies for discipline, which would be outside of this MOA. I guess my concern is, well, first, one thing I have heard from the people that spoke last week and in some of the communications is that this document is better than what we have, that it's an improved document over what we already have. And I'm hearing Mr. Dupler say that it would be longer than a month, and we don't even know that the other agencies would agree to it if we did put additional language in it. I guess I'm kind of looking at it more from a safety and security than a discipline issue. I mean, ironically, I have gotten one complaint about an officer in one of my schools since I have been on the board. And that complaint was on a Knox County Sheriff's officer because he was sitting outside the school in his car, and the parent wanted him actively patrolling the hallways. I mean, it's a challenge, but I do think we have to look at it. And I am appreciative of the resources we get from these outside agencies. But I do have concerns that if we put it off, it'll end up being one of those things that it takes a lot longer for us to get it back. And even then, we don't know that the other parties would agree to it.
Thank you, Ms. Christie. Ms. Owen, did you have a follow-up?
I have two things. First, I'd like to ask Mr. Thomas to strongly and regularly address with staff confidential information being shared in open offices. Is that I know that we have training on that, and I know that the training is very clear, but apparently not clear enough. So I very much appreciate that. Mr. Dupler, do you see any negative consequences to including additional information in the MOU, like the amount of training or definitions or FERPA or any of that? Do you see any negative consequences to having additional information available in the MOU?
Thank you, Ms. Owen. Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, it's hard for me to say off the cuff, but I mean, but I would say that certainly there could be some negative consequences. If you're just putting quotes of the law in there, then no, there would not be any negative consequences of that. But you have to be careful about certain particular types of training, and you have to be careful about how detailed you become. I mean, this document is general and guidelines by design, because one of the things that was mentioned as this document was circulating among the agencies was that the schools have a duty, which they do by state law, to protect their safety plans. And by sharing
a certain amount of detail, and it's a judgment call as to when you get there. But the more detail you share, then the closer you get to sharing your safety plan, which could put students and staff at risk. So I would say that's probably your biggest concern as far as the detail goes.
But specifically the kind of information that we have talked about tonight?
I think, just talking in general terms about what training the SSOs have, I don't see that as a major problem. Again, as Ms. Christie said, that would have to be approved ultimately by the other agencies, but I don't see that as a major problem. And again, putting in some quotes from FERPA, that's readily available information as well.
Thank you.
All right, and Ms. Satterfield.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Board Member Babcock, thank you for bringing up the information regarding your response from your principals. I didn't even think to do that. So thank you for bringing that knowledge to us. And I think that it's important to listen to that group of individuals because they're the ones, they're in charge of their school every single day, and they're the ones that have the relationship with their officers in their school. I hear the concerns from the community about wanting it to be a lot more transparent and knowing what goes on with that. And I'm just not sure if this is the avenue to do it, but I would like us to make a plan to where we are sharing information around this, what we're talking about with the community, because it is a sensitive area. It is something that needs to be addressed about how we work in our schools with our law enforcement. And so regardless of what happens with this particular, if we delay it, if we don't, I would like to see Knox County schools have effective communication with the community about what happens with our officers, because the Sheriff's Department could do one thing, KPD does another thing, and there's a lot of discrepancy. And so that's just my personal ask, is that we communicate and have this information out there, because some communities feel very safe by police officers, some don't. And at the end of the day, I know there's different entities of who's in our classrooms, but when you see an officer with a badge, it all comes into one category. And so I think it's our duty to share that information.
Thank you, Ms. Satterfield. Seeing no other lights, then we have a motion on the floor to delay the MOA for 30 days. And I believe we'll take a roll call vote on that. Why don't you begin with District 9, Ms. Coatney?
Ms. Christie?
Can you clarify that again?
This is the substitute motion to delay this item for 30 days.
No.
Mr. McMillan?
Yes.
Ms. Bounds? No. Ms. Babb?
No.
Mr. Norman?
No.
Ms. Owen? Yes. Ms. Satterfield?
No.
Ms. Horn?
No.
Ms. Hill?
No.
That's 7 no votes and 2 yes, so the motion fails.
All right, so we're back to the original motion, which is to approve the MOA as presented. And we do have we've had a first and a second on that. So I'll call for a roll call vote again, starting with District 9.
Ms. Christie?
Yes.
Mr. McMillan?
No.
Ms. Bounds?
Yes.
Ms. Babb?
Yes.
Mr. Norman?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
No.
Ms. Satterfield?
Yes.
Ms. Horn?
Yes.
Ms. Hill?
Yes.
That's 7 yes votes and 2 no votes. The motion passes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chief. Moving on to item D.
Item 10D, approve resolution discouraging the use of handcuffs on students in K through 5 education settings.
All right, let's see. This is for discussion, is that correct?
It's
Ms. Satterfield requested it be added as an item, so
As
it's...
a voting item?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Do I hear a motion on that?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All right. A motion by Satterfield, second by Owen. And before we enter discussion, we have a public forum on that. Ms. Horn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have one speaker on this resolution, Tanya Coates. Please state your name and county of residence.
Thank you. Tanya Coates, Knox County Education Association. I appreciate it, Madam Chair, and I appreciate this resolution coming from Ms. Satterfield. The challenge, as you heard, the discussion that you just had in regards to our having officers in schools, yes, we as educators want to have that in schools, but what's troubling, as I read that, and I tried to do some inferencing, and so it's some of that agreement is not clear, but when I got to number 6, so they did in the first probably 3, every time it says roles and responsibilities of officers, it stated that they want to establish and they want to promote and they want to make sure they have a safe environment. But number 6 says when feasible that they will arrest kids. Okay, that is emotionally disturbing for kids. We have a lot of challenge that is emotionally, you know, we have kids that are they've got challenges in our so those of you that were counselors, if you were in school, you know that is not the way it used to be. And we've got kids that can trigger all kinds of things that's going on. But particularly if we're arresting or putting handcuffs on kindergarten through 5th grade, I just can't imagine. I mean, I think about, I have custody of my brother's kids. And I think about if you had to handcuff, it doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl, but if you had to handcuff a kid in pre-K through 5th grade, that's a shame on us. We shouldn't be able to do something like that. And particularly, even though her resolution states from pre-K through 5th grade, I'd say any kid, because sometimes it's challenging to even high school kids. We have a challenge out in Farragut where the kids are committing suicide. And it could be something that triggers them of being handcuffed, that knowing that I could be arrested for doing X, Y, Z. So I would hope that I know that you just passed about having this agreement. It's great to have an agreement with our law enforcement, to knowing that they're going to protect and serve our kids. But to actually deal with discipline, and I also read that they have to talk to the administrator first. But sometimes it escalates from 0 to 100 so quickly that I would hope that we would just not, this resolution would not only just include pre-K to 5th graders, but all of our kids, that they don't deserve to be arrested, even if they can just be pulled to the side and we can intervene to help that. I know that the MOU stated that they would do it by any means necessary to help, but when that opportunity is still available for our kids to be arrested in school, it's challenging not only for the students of our school, but it's challenging for the educators, because our hearts hurt when we see our kids. We don't want to be hurt. I know I don't want to be hurt, but we don't want to see our kids be hurt, and we want to make sure that they're lifelong citizens in our community. So I hope that you would take this resolution to really contemplate about our kids being arrested or handcuffed in the presence of other kids, for one, and one particularly just thinking about our kids that are pre-K to 5th grade, but any of our kids, and that's what I had to bring to us, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes public forum on this topic.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion and a second on the floor to accept this resolution. Ms. Satterfield?
Yes, I just wanted to acknowledge the content that was changed from the discussion that we had last week. Changes from K through 5th grade, which is the elementary, because of the conversation of older kids, bigger kids. And so I do agree with the speaker that we just had. I would love it to be no arrest happening, and I also don't know what it's like to be in law enforcement and dealing with situations that they have to. I'm glad that they did share with us that they do not use it as a de-escalation tactic, and so that language was removed as well from this resolution, and we also changed the denounce to discouraging the use of handcuffs on students from K through 5. So I just wanted to point out the suggestions that were made last week and that will we change them to. I'm open to change it to for all high school students, for all students in KCS not happening versus K through 5th grade, but that's open if you all decide. But as it stands right here, this is what I have in present.
Ms. Christie?
Yeah, I just have a question, I guess, for Chief Paducas. This is something, the resolution on handcuffs, did I understand you to say last week this is already something that's highly discouraged as it is? That I mean, it sounds like with those numbers, it's more of a last resort than it is.
Yes, ma'am. We recognize that it's not a pleasant thing to handcuff a student. It's not something we do arbitrarily. It's not something we take lightly. And in our numbers from the last 2 years, there were no elementary school age children in which handcuffs were deployed. And so it is a bad thing. There's nothing good about it. Regrettably, though, there are situations where it does happen, and it needs to happen.
So to say that we discourage it, that's pretty much in line with what you do as well, that you also discourage.
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just also have a question. Speaking from personal experience during the 2016-2017 school year, I, as well as several, I would say the number is above 100, witnessed one of these arrests that happened in the Knox County Public School System. And so my question would be, and this was addressed earlier, versus like the publicity versus private nature of arrests made in the Knox County schools. So my question is, in your protocol, is it mentioned that this is done like in public or in private? Is there protocol to say that other students aren't around when the actual arrest is happening? Because I do agree that can be traumatizing, especially when there's a large number of students, because especially in the middle school and high school level, word of mouth gets around, and I feel like that's kind of disrespectful to the parties involved, not only the ones involved in the arrest, but also those that experience the situation.
I can tell you as a general rule, and this MOU calls for doing it in the least disruptive manner possible. And so you try to do it quietly, you try and do it without disruption. And of course, having a student taken into custody during the school day, if it's done in a public setting, witnessed by a lot of students, it does disrupt the day. And so there is an effort made in general terms to do it in the least disruptive manner possible.
Any other comment? Oh, Ms. Satterfield?
Last thing, Madam Chair, I promise. This is, my effort in presenting this resolution is to start the momentum of sharing information and what's going on in our schools with law enforcement. And so thank God that this resolution does align with what we are already doing in our schools. Had this resolution been presented and we see numbers that were drastically different, then I think that brings up more conversation. But this resolution is aligned with what we're already doing, and I look forward to presenting more information to the community about what we're doing.
Thank you, Ms. Satterfield. And for exactly the reason that you just stated, it is what we are already doing, because clearly, as Chief said, it's never good if this has to happen. And clearly, it is an extremely rare occurrence that it happens. And for that reason, I do not feel I can support this resolution, not because I don't agree with what's there, but typically I prefer to see a resolution on situations where there is a disagreement between factions. I'm not even really hearing in this that there's any disagreement to start with on it, because if it even occurs, nobody likes it, and it is an absolute last resort. Resolutions typically revolve around topics. Some of them we've done in the past is our board stance on charter schools, where there is a strong faction in disagreement, or on our testing protocol, this type of thing. So because of those reasons, I will not support the resolution, because I'm just not real sure it's necessary. All right, Ms. Horn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was my first, when I first read this, it brought the question, my question was, okay, is this occurring? Is this a problem? And I think my concern is, if we pass a resolution like this, I think my concern is that we're drawing attention to something that makes it seem like we have a problem with it. And so my concern is that it will actually communicate the opposite effect that we want, because I certainly agree that we should not do this if unless it's absolutely necessary. So that's my concern. I agree with it, and I'm certainly glad that this is our practice. But I do have that concern that I can see the headline now, and it's going to draw attention to this, and then people are going to think that that's what we're doing. And so that's my reservation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, Mr. Norman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Same here. I think that it's unnecessary. We're doing the right things with kids. Obviously, 7 and 2 years, my gosh, that's just incredible. And I just want to compliment our law enforcement folks for what a attitude of restraint that they have and what they deal with, the kinds of things they're confronted with, which I've seen firsthand. And I know how they do everything they can do to avoid even touching a student. So, but we don't have a padded cell in our charter school for nothing. We're dealing with some serious emotional issues that get way out of control, and there's just nothing else you can do. And so I think they're doing a great job. So I'm not going to support the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. All right, we'll go to a roll call vote then. Ms. Coatney, if you'd start with District 1.
Ms. Satterfield?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Mr. Norman?
No.
Ms. Babb?
Yes.
Ms. Bounds?
Yes.
Mr. McMillan?
No.
Ms. Christie?
Yes.
Ms. Horn?
No.
Ms. Hill?
No.
That's 5 yes votes and 4 no votes. Motion
Right.
passes.
Resolution passes. All right, next on our agenda then is public forum. Ms. Horn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have one speaker, Kim Kredich. Please state your name and county of residence.
Hi, Kim Kredich, Knox County. Madam Chair and members, good to see you again. I just emailed you something not too long ago, a few hours ago, and I hope you'll take a look at it. I traveled to Nashville on my own free time on Monday to attend the State Special Ed Advisory Council quarterly meeting, and I find these meetings wonderful because there's all this information out there, and they even wanted, 2 of them wanted me to join by the end of the thing. I said, no, I'm trying to get rid of this job that I volunteer at. But I encourage you to look at the little video clips because I really expressed my high hopes for a change in Knox County Special Ed with the hiring of Jason Myers, who I know personally and who I know has seen inclusion really work at West High School at the very least, and I'm sure other places. So that's my hope. And as Ms. Satterfield said, we're trying to talk about communication, maybe get communication going, and I would really encourage you to reach out to Tennessee Department of Education and have them come in. They're going to be, evidently we've missed 7 years of targets in a row, so they will be coming to talk about inclusion targets that haven't been met for 7 straight years, these meager targets. So now we're so far behind in the state average, and our state is so far behind in the national average. But I would encourage you to make that an opportunity to regain the trust of the public that I hear from. You only see me standing up here, but I promise you I represent a whole lot of people. So I really would plead with you to open the informational channels up to everyone so that we can enter a new era and regain trust and really work on, I mean, the numbers are there, the numbers aren't lying, and there are reasons our numbers are not good, and I think we have an opportunity now to really improve. One thing I would like to ask is there is evidently a policy now that I think I emailed you a while ago that was brought to the attention of the families for whom I advocate. Some the day before IEP meetings, that every time I would be going to an IEP meeting, Knox County would send its attorney. And that's fine with me. It helps to have more people in the mix, and 5 families decided to retain attorneys right then and there. Unfortunately, I think 4 are moving on to court cases. I get to go to IEP meetings and hear the things that I've been saying all this time said by an attorney, and then, you know, they say, yeah, I can win this case. So I'm just a volunteer advocate. Darn it, I'm a musician. I'm not an attorney. I do my best for families on a volunteer basis. But what concerns me is that those meetings were shifted into the summer. Before meetings were not. They didn't need anything. Parents aren't going to spend $300 an hour for an IEP meeting that doesn't really warrant that, but that they wanted me at. And your attorney came to 2 of them and then didn't show up for the next 2. And that was not communicated until everybody sat down at the meeting. And they said, oh, there were scheduling issues. Well, that means that the parents who did spend thousands of dollars bringing an attorney from the opposite end of the state are thinking, wait a second, so the attorney might not have shown up at our meeting. And so I would ask that if there's going to be some Kim Kredich policy, because that's what your attorney said on tape at a meeting, that she would be at every meeting that I attended, then please spell it out so that parents aren't being put in the position to not necessarily know who will be attending their meeting. If the attorney can't make it from Knox County School and the parent was notified that they would be in attendance, then that meeting should be postponed. So I'm really not arguing against the attorney coming. I mean, maybe it's a new age of litigation. Maybe that's how we're going to improve our numbers. I hate to think that. I've fought against that. But if you could please clarify this policy somehow so that when I tell a parent and when you all, Knox County Schools, informs a parent that an attorney will be there, it's really upsetting when that attorney doesn't show to all the parents that they just don't know. So if you could clarify that, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Madam Chair, that concludes public forum.
All right.